If you've been scrolling through endless listings of pallet lifters, watching the same heavy-duty claims pop up, and still feel that knot in your stomach every time you think about spending a few $100s on the wrong tool, you're not alone. The market is full of flashy numbers, lifting capacities, fork widths, color choices, yet none of that helps when you're trying to picture the lifter under a real pallet in a cramped warehouse aisle. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. In this video, I'm going to walk through why the Vestil HDP 448 might actually be the piece of equipment that stops the guesswork, and when it's better to keep looking. First, let's talk about the everyday situation that most small to mid-size operations face. Imagine you run a distribution center that handles a mix of 48-inch pallets, some loaded with bulk sheet goods, others with irregularly shaped boxes. Your team needs to get a pallet off the ground quickly, tilt it just enough to slide a forklift in, and then set it back down without wobbling. The biggest headache is the gap under the pallet. If the forks are too wide or the head too light, the lifter can tip, and you end up with a dangerous swing or a stuck pallet. The Vestil HDP 448 addresses that with 3 design choices that matter on the shop floor: tapered forks that slide under pallets with less scraping, a large square head that acts as a built-in counterweight, and a main support that includes handy handles for positioning the unit exactly where you need it. Now, who should actually consider buying this lifter? If you're a small warehouse, a workshop that does occasional pallet moves, or a DIY shop that needs to lift pallets up to 4,000 pounds a few times a day, the HDP 448 fits neatly into that sweet spot. The 48-inch fork length matches the standard pallet size, so you won't waste space trying to line up a longer fork on a short load. The 4,000 pound rating is generous for most non-industrial applications, meaning you can handle heavy bulk items, think bags of cement, pallets of lumber, or stacks of metal parts without worrying about hitting a limit. The fact that it meets the ASME B30.20 standard from 1993 also gives you a baseline of safety compliance, which is reassuring if your facility has to pass an audit. On the other hand, if your operation moves pallets every hour of every day, relies on high-speed cycle times, or needs a lifter that can be integrated into an automated line, you'll likely want a pneumatic or electric pallet jack with motorized controls. The Vestil unit is completely manual, meaning you need to apply the lifting force yourself, which can be tiring if you're doing dozens of lifts in a row. Likewise, if your pallets are routinely larger than 48 inches, or if you need to lift loads that exceed 4,000 pounds, say, heavy machinery or bulk raw material, the HDP 448 will simply be undersized. In those scenarios, you're better off looking at a larger capacity, possibly hydraulic, pallet lifter. Let's get into the practical strengths that set this tool apart. The tapered forks are not just a nice visual touch, they actually reduce the amount of metal you have to push past the pallet deck. In my experience with similar designs, the taper can shave a few centimeters off the entry distance, which translates to less friction and a lower chance of denting the pallet. For anyone who has tried to lift a pallet with a straight-edge fork only to hear that dreaded scrape and see a cracked wood board, the taper feels like a genuine convenience. The large square head serves as a counterweight, and that's more than a marketing line. When you place the lifter under a loaded pallet and start to raise it, the head's mass helps keep the whole assembly level, preventing the forks from tipping forward. I've seen users with lighter weight lifters where the head tilts backward, forcing you to readjust mid-lift. The Vestil's head eliminates that micro-adjustment step, saving a few seconds per lift time that adds up over a shift. The handles on the main support are another small but thoughtful feature. Instead of trying to grab a thin steel tube or using a separate pry bar to wedge the lifter into place, you can grip the molded handles, shift the unit laterally, and lock it under the pallet with a single motion. In cramped aisles where you're working shoulder to shoulder with shelving, that ergonomic advantage reduces the awkward contortions that often lead to back strain. It also makes it easier for a single worker to position the lifter, which is a real cost saver if you're trying to keep labor headcount low. No product is perfect, so let's address the weaknesses that become visible after you bring the HDP 448 into a real work environment. The steel construction is solid, but the finish is a basic blue powder coat that can chip if you constantly drag the unit over rough concrete. That's not a deal breaker, but it means you'll want to keep an eye on the coating if you operate in a dusty or